anything that involves people is where I started. Due to the pandemic, like many people, I had to pivot and learn something new. So I took that opportunity to learn real estate photography, videography. I also studied and got my pilot's license for drones. So not only do I do drone photography, I also do drone videography. And I also do Matterport. So those of you that have Matterport, I learned that technology as well. So the full gamut of imagery that you might need in the real estate world. Basically during COVID, I had to learn it all. So here I am. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about the pros of using drones. One of the things that I looked at as a business owner was, why would people want to use it? Is it really feasible? Like, should I get into this market? Does it make sense? And from the research that I did, absolutely, I feel like drone imagery can change the way that people see your properties. And so we're going to talk about some of that and some unique ideas. When I was looking at what was out there, I looked at different listings and different agents and what they did. And, what I realized was a lot of the same looks were happening across the board. There are some unique ways that you can use drones. So I'm going to talk about some of those. We're also going to talk about the numbers. There is research out there. I'll share with you what I learned. I'll share you some of the numbers of why you might want to use drone imagery in your marketing. And then, the big scary thing with the FAA regulations, it's really not that scary. It's going to sound scary, but I just want to tell you what you need to know. And if you have a photographer that you're using for drone imagery now, these are some of the things that you need to ask them if they know about. And if they're a pilot, they're going to know. But, if you're using a non-pilot, these are some things that you need to ask them. So, and then some things to consider. Maybe you're going to fly a drone yourself, or, if you have a cousin or someone in your office that's doing it, things to consider that they may not know. These are things that I didn't know until I was trained. So I just feel like it's important to educate and let you guys know what to be aware of. So let's start off with the good stuff. The pros, why would you want to use drone imagery? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it shows the whole property. So if you've got a listing that has a lot of land, or maybe it is up close to a park or a lake or the beach or whatever it might be, if you've got some really interesting things around, or, like this one that you're seeing in the image here, it's surrounded by trees. Well, that's a big plus for some people. So we wanted to show that. So, it shows the whole property. The other thing is, if you've got details in the upper levels, like let's say there's a balcony on the top or a really beautiful window detail, you can get that drone like super close to the house and get some really good images of the upper levels. Funny story, actually, one of my friends that flies drones, he actually takes the drone up to the roof and cleans out the leaves from his gutters with the propeller wind. It's kind of funny. So you can get really close. But anyway, so you can get some good stuff from those upper levels and some really beautiful images of some of that detail work. And then also, if it's a good neighborhood, maybe they've got a neighborhood clubhouse or a neighborhood pool or whatever, you can show some of that stuff as well. And then even because drones do video, you can literally like drive down the street or drive down the driveway. Matter of fact, this property that you see has a really beautiful long driveway. And so what we did is we took the drone and we did a video like coming into the driveway all the way up into the parking lot. So it's really beautiful and it shows the landscaping and all that. So those are some other ideas that you might want to use it for. And then another thing to consider is your audience. If you think about who's buying homes these days, it's the gamut from the baby boomers, the Gen X, Gen Y, and the millennials. And specifically the millennials, they're really attracted to this new technology and they're attracted to drone imagery. So if that's someone that's in your target market, it's absolutely something you should consider in your listings. And I'm not going to read everything that's on the slide here. You guys can read it and we'll put it out there so you can have it. But just some of the takeaways from that on the pros for using drones. Here's some unique ideas. You may not have thought to bring the drone inside the house. I know that can sound a little bit scary, but actually one of the things that I do to practice my skill set on how to move a drone around is by flying it inside the house. So if you've got a beautiful staircase, or one of my favorites is people ask me all the time on that second level to get a picture overlooking the den or, the dining room or whatever it might be. And if you know anything about how your photographer takes pictures, they're probably taking multiple exposures of every shot. So I take 7. I take 7 pictures of every, or 7 frames of every shot that I'm going to give you. And the reason I do that is I go from the highest exposure to the lowest exposure, and then I merge all of those together so that the window's not blown out white. You can actually see what's outside the window. And then on the other spectrum, you can see what's in the shadows as well. So everything looks really well lit, and you can see every detail. The drones can do that too. But if I take a camera and I hold it over the ledge, the thing that's going to happen is my hand's going to shake, or the tripod's going to shake a little bit because it's not stable on the ground. And so when I go to merge those 7 photos together, it's going to look blurry and it's not going to be good. So while from an agent perspective, you may think it looks wonderful, from a photographer's perspective, I cringe every time. So a better way to do it is to take your drone and kind of just go right out over that ledge and get a beautiful picture down onto what's below. And you can see the ledge, you can see the staircase, whatever, and everything is really beautiful. And because the drone is very steady and stationary, when I take those 7 photos and merge them together, they're beautiful. So just something maybe you haven't thought of. Another thing that you can do with them is, if you want to do video, you can actually fly it up the stairs so that you can see that landing at the top of the stairs. A lot of times we don't photograph that because it's not a room. But in a video, it really shows off that landing area at the top and the bottom of the staircase. And especially if there's any like really beautiful details, it'll show all of that too. Like I know if you've got a big 2-story foyer, a lot of times there's a big beautiful window at the top, and they don't always show that well in photos. But with that drone, you can really get a beautiful picture of that. And then even small spaces like bathrooms. I know as a photographer, it's really hard to get a good photo of those smaller bathrooms, those half baths. But with a drone, what you can do is you can take it right over the toilet and high enough that it's over where you can't see it in the mirror, and you kind of angle down and you get a really beautiful picture in that bathroom that you can't get with a regular still camera. You're going to see the tripod and all that stuff in it, and it's not pretty. So a drone is a perfect way to get some of those smaller spaces. Or even if you have a really beautiful closet that you want to show. Closets don't always photograph well, but with a drone, you can get right in the middle and take some really good photos. Okay, so the numbers. This is a study that was done by soldbyair.com. And this is one of the things that I researched when I was looking at, is it feasible? Should I even learn how to fly drones? Does it make sense for my business model? And the biggest takeaway is people like it. When you see drone imagery on a listing, they like it. They look at it, they notice it, especially on social media when they're scrolling. If you see a really beautiful aerial photo, it does stop your scroll. So that's something that it looks different than just a regular, front on of the house. So that is something that it does stop the scroll. The other thing is, if you have larger lot sizes, so if it's something that's, 2, 3, 4 acres plus, you should absolutely use drone imagery for those. It's been found that, more than half of the time people are using drones for that. And that's something that's really critical. And then the other is, if it's a higher valued home, spend the extra money and get the drone imagery. It's totally worth it, especially for those larger homes. All right, and I'll give you guys a copy of this, or if you want to research it yourself, you're more than welcome to. This one that they did, it's by soldbyair.com, and the link is down there at the bottom. Okay, some things to be aware of, and please don't let this scare you off. These are some tools that you can use. Or teach whoever's doing your drone photography for you now that they need to be doing these things, and they might already be. But if you're trying to get someone that maybe is a hobbyist and doesn't know these things, this is something that you can teach them. One is, you need to know what airspace you're in. So anytime an agent calls me and says, hey, I have this property, I'd really love to do some drone imagery of it, my first question is, what's the address? And the first thing I do is I go to Before You Fly and Air Map, and I look at all the precautions. Okay, so like my house in particular, I'm in an area where the Olive Branch Airport is, their air path goes right near my house. And then I'm also close to a hospital that has a helipad. So up until about 6 months ago, you could not fly a drone in my neighborhood, or at my house in particular. So, it's something that you really need to know where you can fly. And if you look at the pictures over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see when I put in an address, it tells me, okay, you've got an airport that's closed, you've got a heliport, there's a hospital, there's 9 schools. And then if you look at the next one over, it's got these little circles. Well, those circles represent different airspaces. There's different classes of airspace, and you need to know where you can fly. So these kind of tell you if you're not within a circle, then it's safe to fly. But if you're inside one of those circles, you need to look and see, okay, well, what's the issue? Why can't I fly here? And they're two different apps, but they do generally the same thing. And there's a couple other ones too. There's one called Kitty Hawk, and there's a couple others that you can use. But these are the two that I use. And I usually check both because they're updated regularly. And it's something that I want to know for a fact that I can fly in that area and I'm not going to get in trouble. As you know, in Memphis being the area where FedEx is, the FAA is really strict here because we've got the international airport, we've got FedEx, so there's a lot of things that the FAA is looking out for here in Memphis specifically. And then the other thing is insurance, especially if you're flying around homes. If something happens to the drone, if the wind picks up or, something happens, a bird hits it or whatever, then, if it flies off and breaks a window or lands on someone's car and dents it, you need to know that you're covered and you're not going to have to pay that expense to have it fixed. So make sure that they have insurance. One thing that I do, I have insurance liability through my regular insurance provider, but then for every flight that I do, I get extra coverage just to make sure. Okay. Safety first. One of the things I didn't realize that you had to do is keep a flight log. Almost just like if you were flying a plane, it's kind of intense. So one of the things I do, I have a flight log book and I literally map out my flight. So I get the address from the agent. I can either go on like Google Maps or whatever, and I look at the area. So I look at, okay, where are the trees? What am I shooting? Are there exterior power lines? And that way I can look at it and know, okay, here's where I need to go to fly. Here's where I can launch from. If I'm doing video, I need to look at the surrounding area, but I draw it out ahead of time. So I don't show up the day of and go, what am I going to do today? I already know I've got it pre-planned. Also, you need to make sure that you've checked the weather for that day. And I even, because I'm a little bit nervous about the FAA. They say that they're just as bad as the IRS. So I don't want them ever coming to me and questioning me and me not having an answer. So I literally print out those screenshots that you saw before. I print out the Weather Channel app so that I've got, what the weather was at the time of the flight. And I have on here all my notes about the pre-flight checklist. And one of the most important things to check is your batteries. I didn't know this. I mean, I used to travel a lot for work. And I had heard that, you can't take the Samsung phones because of lithium batteries, all this stuff. And I was like, well, whatever. But the issue is these lithium batteries are really dangerous. If they catch fire, they emit a toxic gas. So especially on an airplane, I understand now why, you're in that enclosed environment that it could literally be deadly. But on drones, the issue is inside each one of those little battery packs, there's 2 lithium batteries. And if they're both not good, or if one or the other isn't good, it can explode, and it can actually explode in air with your drone in air, and that's not good. Those particles go everywhere, and who knows what would happen. So inside of the control panel, you can look and check your batteries to make sure that your batteries are safe. So make sure that your pilot knows to check that because that's super critical. Okay. The next thing is, I mentioned that the FAA is the regulatory body for drones and flying these unmanned aircrafts. Here's just some information that, these are kind of their guidelines at the very highest level. You can't go above 400 feet. So if you're doing a very large plot of land, or maybe you're doing a new development, you want to get the whole area, that may not be possible. You can only go up to 400 feet above ground level unless there's a structure. So like if there's a house, then I can go 400 feet above that house. So those are some things to consider too. I'm not going to read through all those. You guys can read those, or just go to the FAA website and you can find any of this information. Kind of the biggest things are that 400 feet, you're not supposed to fly at night, and you're not supposed to fly over people. So those are kind of the big 3 things. Okay, the question I always get is, do I really have to have a pilot's license? The rules when I got my pilot license in May is that unless you're flying for a hobby or recreation, you do have to use a pilot. Now, there have been some changes that came about in December of 2020, and I'll talk about some of those changes. I'm not 100% clear on what they mean, and I'll talk about that in a second. But Can a non-pilot shoot for me before December 28th? No, they couldn't. You have to have someone that has a license, or you can get in major trouble. And I'll talk about what that is in a second. But you do have to have that if you're flying for compensation. So if you've got a listing, you're flying to list that property, you're going to be compensated for it, and you're compensating your photographer. So that's a big no-no up until December 28th. Okay. Why is it a no-no, and what is the risk, or what are the consequences if you were to do that? If you do use a hobbyist, they can be fined $1,100 per image that's used for the property. So if they're giving you 25 photos and 5 of those are drone imagery, then they would be fined $5,500. And you would be fined $11,000. And I don't know about you, but I don't have $11,000 just sitting around to give to the FAA. So I would recommend using a pilot that is certified for your drone photography. Okay, so the new rules. Before, any pilot used to have the CFR Part 107 license. That's the test that they had to take. There are some new regulations that came out that say that you can get a certificate waiver. But here's the thing. They say to get a waiver, you have to prove that you understand everything that's in the CFR Part 107, and you have to prove that you have that knowledge. So why not just take the test and get the pilot's license? To me, it just doesn't make any sense why you would do that versus the other, unless there was some reason that you didn't want to go through the background check, or maybe there was some reason why the FAA wouldn't approve your application. I mean, I really don't know. But if you have to prove that you have that knowledge, there's no sense in not taking the test. Isn't hard. So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you've got a hobbyist or someone that just wants to apply for the waiver, they can do that. The cost is the same, so it really doesn't matter. There are some other risks that I want to make sure that you're aware of, and these are things that completely blew my mind. Like I would have never even thought of these, but apparently these are some things that have come up, and it makes it really hard to get insurance on your drone through a regular provider. So I had to go to someone that was very specific in drone coverage. But there are some tort cases where if you fly over someone's property, they say that you're trespassing. So, I don't know if there's a rule now that says how far in the air above someone's property is considered no longer their property, but it's just general airspace. So that's one that to be considerate of. Another is privacy laws. You are up in the air. You do have cameras. If you were to catch something on camera that, maybe the neighbor had someone at their house that they shouldn't, and now it's displayed on your listing, that is something to be considerate of. Also nuisance laws, sometimes, especially the older drones were really loud and people would complain and turn you into the police for nuisance. And then the other one is animal cruelty. I don't know about you, but I know back several years, they talked about the fireworks and how dogs really just freaked out about them. Well, they do the same thing with drones because the drones are scary. I mean, the dogs will come up to it and bark at it, and it kind of freaks them out a little bit. And if a dog happens to run away from that drone and injures themselves, then you could be liable for that as well. And then the obvious ones, of course, if you run into something, or you hit a tree and a limb falls on a car or whatever, those are some things to consider too. And I don't want that to scare you away from using drones. Your pilot takes on that responsibility with their insurance. So if you have someone that is a certified pilot, we're aware of all of these things, and we're looking out for that ahead of time, and we're going to make sure that you're covered and you're safe. So anyway, just some food for thought. That's really all that I have. I have no idea how long that took, but that's all that I had to share today. So I will open it up for questions. If anybody has any, I would love to answer them now. Taylor, was there anything in the chat?
No, I'm not seeing any questions. If anybody wants to post in the chat, feel free to do that, or raise your hand or unmute yourself. But thank you, Kelly. That was fantastic. So much information. And who knew there was that much to go into?
I know.
Whole thing.
Well, it's funny because when I first started learning about all this, it was like, seriously, people will complain about nuisance or, about flying over their property. I had no idea that it never entered my brain to think about those things. So I'm glad I did my research.
Well, and I can vouch for Kelly. I'm not a real estate agent, obviously, but like I said at the beginning of the presentation, she does a full gamut of different photography things, and she's done stuff for me and my family. And her work is just amazing. She has an eye for it all. So to add this to your book of, things that you do, I think is fantastic and something that's great for agents to consider using.
Very good. Thank you, Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. And, there are a lot of really good drone photographers out there. And, one of the things I didn't mention this earlier, but I thought about it when I was putting this presentation together. Someone had said to me that, a drone is really just a camera. It's just on a tripod that can go anywhere, right? So, I always think of the camera in my hand or the camera on a tripod at ground level, but it's just a camera on a different tripod. And, especially with video, you think about all of these dollies and jigs and all the stuff that can get different angles and different, ways of moving the camera around. And the drone does all of that. So it's like all of those things built into one. And you can fly it inside, outside. It's really amazing. I think the biggest limitations are, it does not record sound. So if you're going to do any type of video that requires sound, then you need to have another way to capture the audio with microphones or whatever. So if I'm doing something for a commercial video, the audio has to be recorded separately, but that's really not a big deal. We do that all the time. So yeah, I mean, I never thought of it in that way, and it opened a whole new world for me, other than just the aerial photography that we all see.
Right. Couple comments coming in, Kelly. Karen said, thank you. Great information to be aware of. Definitely a plus to have a pro to do this for us. And Erica Martin said, such an amazing information. Now I need a listing. I can't wait to hire you to shoot my listings this year. Had no clue there were so many shots you could capture for my listings.
Very
so
good.
Clearly there's value seen from the agent side of things. But at this point, I did record this, so we will kind of share this, and Kelly's going to share the slides as well, I believe.
Yes, I will. And I just put up the last slide. It's got my contact information. So if you have questions that you think about later, feel free to email me. You can text me. That's my cell phone number, or call me. Any of those will work. Or you can always go to my website. It's just kellydayportraits.com, and there's a contact form in there, so you can always do it that way as well.
Well, thank you, Kelly, so much. We really appreciate all of the hard work that you're doing and just giving the information, to be honest with you. We all need extra tools to help grow our business, and I think this is a clear, advantageous tool to be used. So,
very good. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.